his I believe his mother's alive in Montreal. No, it's first day. Yeah, it's first day. Okay, so the Gemara wanted to know, when do we start counting the Havchana for the get, which is the 3 months? So we had a machlokes. Rav said it was from Shas Nesina. Shmuel said it was from Shas Ksiva. The Gemara brought a raya from a brayso in each position, but the Gemara paskin at the end, like Mishas Ksiva, which would be according to Shmuel, which would be Lakula. Then the Gemara wanted to know at what point the Ksuba changes from Atnai Bezin to a standard Chayv. Again, there was a machlokes. Rav said you need 2 things to happen. Tifkoim, it has to be partially paid. Tiskoif, Bezdin has to say, okay, you owe the money. Shmuel says one or the other. Once again, we brought a raya from one brayso to Rav, and from one brayso at least to one part of Shmuel, that if it's Zokfa and Memilba, it's susceptible to Shemitah. Rav did both. I don't know if the order makes a difference. I don't know. Someone who wants to get Shemitah to be Neshamet. Shmuel said that Ksuba is like a Ma'aseh Beis Din. Unlike the get that has to be signed on the same day that it's written, Ksuba, his chayvis comes with the Ksiva, not with the Edom, and therefore we're not concerned with the Ksuba to be signed the same day that it was written. And the Gemara said a story where Rabbi Chia bar Rav, his Ksuba was just such a Ksuba, which was written during the day and it was signed later at night. And his father Rav was by the Chasna and he didn't protest to that. But the Gemara says it's not a ride that he holds that this is a special halacha b'ksubas. Could be since they were asukin by Se'inyan, whenever you're involved in creating the star, no matter what type of star it is, they're in the middle of working on it. It's a work in progress. And there's no hefsek. We're just working on it, but it slept to the night, even for a star choy, Rashi says, the Gemara says, that would be good. And Rashi says the reason why is because there would be a choy. Then the Gemara wanted to understand. Of course, that's exactly what we're trying to say. You don't have a raya. I'm sorry. I'm mixing it up with the ksuba. By a get, I don't know. But again, I don't know. I don't know the answer. That's a good horror. I don't know. Okay, Zok to Gemara weiter. The pashas that you work by a get as well, because there's a coil, but it doesn't say beferish. Reb Shimon is machshir. We're going to go now explain Reb Shimon who held that a backdated get, a get whose date is a day before the item is signed, that date is kosher. We said that even according to Rabbi Yochanan, who understood that according to the Rabbanon, the reason for the takana of Zman and the get, the Shem Yechpeh, that's only according to the Rabbanon. But according to Rabbi Shimon, everybody agrees the reason is because we want her to be able to collect payers. So the question is, why would Rabbi Shimon say a get that's dated a day before the Chesima, why would he say that's kosher? Are we not concerned that she'll collect payers from a time where she wasn't entitled to those payers? Zog to Gemara, Rabbi Shimon holds she's always entitled to the payers, even before the Chesima. The moment the husband plans to divorce his wife, he's no longer zoich in the payers. So therefore, sure, the date on the get, even if it's before the Chesima, at that point she would be entitled to payers. She's probably entitled to payers even earlier than that, but she has a proof from the start. Gewaltig. Then we had a machlokes when Reb Shimon said that you can have the signature on the get a day before. A day after the zman on the get. Does that mean one day, as Rish Lakish says, or Rabbi Yochanan holds no? Even 10 days, even 10 days later, there's no problem of a get being predated. And the chashash, why you would say it would be a problem, is chashin shemapayis. We're afraid that the husband backed out of the get, and Rashi learns we're afraid that it's a get yoshan. He had relations with her. Tosfos learns that it has nothing to do with relations. We're afraid he was mevatel l'shlichus because he no longer wants to get. That was the shaila we had in Reb Shimon. Then the Gemara came up with another shaila. What happened if someone told 10 people, write a get for my wife? And the Gemara explains it's when he spoke out kolchem, all 10 of you. There's a shaila. Surely all 10 have to sign the get. But the question is, do all 10 have to sign the get because they're Eidim, or do all 10 need to sign? Only 2 are Eidim, the other 8 are just there because the husband wants to make it difficult for his wife, but they're not really part of the get. They're just a Tanai to allow the get to be Mekuyim. The Gemara said there's 3 nafkaminas in this Shaila. Nafkamina 1 is if 2 Eidim signed right away and the rest of the Eidim signed later, 10 days later. So according to Rish Lakish, according to Reb Shimon, that wouldn't be allowed. That was one nafkamina. The other nafkamina is if 2 of them were Eidim Pisulim. If 2 of them were Eidim Pisulim. If they're all Eidim, then it would passel. But if we can say that these 2 are just part of the Tnai, not Eidim, then it wouldn't be a problem. If they're Eidim, but if they only need to sign because it's just a Tnai, then it wouldn't be a problem. That's not a problem because the other 8 aren't even Eidim. They're just there for a Tnai. A lot of Misadik do that. That's right. Because if there's a group of Eidim and one of them is Posel, it will Posel them all. Yeah. No, here they're not Eidim. He wasn't Mazman and Alt Eidim. They were just there for tonight. I'm sorry? That's correct. That's correct. That's why it wouldn't be a problem. Okay, Gewalt. So then we said that if these 2 Eidim that were Posel signed first, then even if you hold that they're T'nai, there could be a problem because someone will think that the get was relying on those 2 Eidim, and they'll think that 2 Eidim that aren't kosher are kosher for stars. You think that Posel Eidim could be kosher for stars. So actually there's only 2 nafkaminas in between the Shaila if it's a T'nai or an Eid. 1 is if they didn't sign right away, and 2 is if they're Korav or Posel. Zog to Gemara a new Shaila. Not a new Shaila, we actually had a story that had this Shaila in it. Someone told 10 people, write a get for my wife. And what happened was 2 Eidim signed right on time, and the other 2 signed 10 days later. And the question came to Rabbi Shua ben Levi, what to do. So Rabbi Shua ben Levi said, Kedaihi Rabbi Shimon lismach alav b'shas chak. We could be soymech on Rabbi Shimon that even though the rest of the people signed later, nevertheless, it's going to be good. Which means right off the bat, Rabbi Shua ben Levi learned that they're all Eidim. It's not just at night, which means he's learning like Rish Lakish, right? Rish Lakish said it's Eidim, and Rabbi Yochanan said it's at night, if I'm not mistaken, right? Rish Lakish said Kulcham Mishum Eidim, and Rabbi Yochanan said Mishum Tnai. So Rabbi Shua ben Levi must hold that they're Eidim, but he holds you could be Samech on Rabbi Shimon, who says that the Eidim could sign later. But fact Gemara, if Rabbi Shimon's going according to Rish Lakish is the one who said that even Rabbi Shimon, who allows Eidim to sign late, only a day later, not 10 days later. So Gemara, maybe Rabbi Shua ben Levi holds like Rabbi Yochanan that says you can sign up to 10 days later. But fact Gemara can't be going to Rabbi Yochanan. Because according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's not a problem to begin with. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the other 8 Eidim are only a T'nai, they're not real 8. The Gemara, Rabbi Shua ben Levi can pick and choose his Rabbi Yochanan's. He held up the Rabbi Yochanan that says in Rabbi Shimon that even if the Eidim sign 10 days later, it's kosher. But he doesn't hold over the Rabbi Yochanan who says that when someone asks for 10 Eidim, that it's a T'nai, he learns like a Shlokish that they're all Mishum Eidim. Okay, now it takes us to a new sugya of how a get has to be written. B'chol kaisun, you can use any type of ink to write a get. B'sam, b'sikra, u'v'kumus, u'v'kankantain. All I know is that all of these inks are black except for sikra, which is red. As long as it's ink that will last, it won't evaporate. Ein kaisin loy b'mashkin, you're not allowed to use a drink. V'loy b'mei peris, v'loy b'chol davar she'enim eskayim. Ink that won't last, that becomes faded out, that's not kosher to write a get with. Now that we've discussed the ink, a drink, like my Paris. Right? Now that we discussed what ink you're allowed to use, let's discuss what type of paper you're allowed to use. Al hakoil koisin, al ola shal zayis, on the leaf of a olive tree, val karen shal para, but v'noisin los para, you have to give it the para, or al yad shal eved, v'noisin los eved. Rabbi Yosy Glili Omer Ein Koshin Loy Al Davar Sheyesh B'Ruachayim Loy Al Oichlin. You can't write it on food, and you can't write it on Davar Sheyesh B'Ruachayim. The Gemara will explain the Makar. So let me ask you a question. Did you ever see an olive tree? How big is the olive leaf? It's not the size of a maple leaf. How could you write a get on a little thing? Elamai, you're going to have to write it on a whole bunch of leaves, connected to one branch. I guess we consider a leaf reliable enough. Maybe she'll have to keep her get in a vase. You know, if her husband dies,
is there a minimum font size? I don't understand.
And if her husband survives, she'll keep the stem in a vase. So we can call today shir. Will it be a vase or will it be urn? What is it called where they keep the ashes? An urn, right? I guess they won't let him take a shower. I hear. And they destroy it right away. Yeah, they give her a receipt. Yeah. I guess he won't take a shower until he gives her the get. I guess we'll have to see how long it has to last. But let me ask you a question. You could get rubbed off, but I guess it doesn't have to last forever. So I guess let's wait till the Gemara analyzes it. I know the Gemara in Daf Yutes doesn't talk about it. But could be the Gemara talks about it later. So let's see what the Gemara says over here. You're writing it on a leaf. It has to be you're writing it on multiple leaves. So there was a Shaila Zay by Hadassim. What if you have a Hadas, grows out of one stem, but two branches grow out of one stem? Is that considered one Hadas or is that considered two Hadas? So the Poskim want to bring a Raya from this Mishnah that is considered one Hadas. Because if you write a get, it has to be on multiple leaves. There's no way you can write an entire get on a small little leaf of an olive branch, right? Al-Korchach means that since it's all on one branch, it's considered one leaf. So I was even if there's two stems, they want to bring a raya that it's also considered one stem. You need two adasim. Those two, we wouldn't count as two adasim. I think so, yeah. I hear. So I guess it's only a raya according to that shita. Okay, so let's see what these things are. Dayoy is the yusa. You know what dayoy is? It's the yusa. It's ink. Okay. It's funny that you said that. It's the yoy. Toishva says dayoy the yusa. I remember the time the yoy shalonu who carried dayoy v'loy oisay she'oisin me'afotzim v'hula mikra dayoy. So I'm not sure if that's the use or not, but could be it is. Okay, so let's see the Gemara right. Sam is Samo, Sikra Amurabba Bavachana is Sakarta Shma. It's called Sakarta, but it's red in color. Kumus is Kuma. Kankantoim Amurabba Bavachana Mashmul Chasha de Ushbachi. This is black shoe polish that shoemakers use. With Chaldover shoe miskaim and anything that will be long lasting. Lasuya mai, lasuya haditani Rab Chanina, kosvu b'mei tori, the apta kosher. What is mei tori? So Rashi says mei tori is mayim sheshoyim bapri te'enafotim. It's water that you soaked a peri in it, so it has some type of color. That's Rashi in his second shot, but in his first bit, Rashi is mei geshamim. It's rainwater which is dirty. And therefore, if you write with rainwater, if you use rainwater as ink, that dirt will leave an impression. Tani Rab Chia, Kasu be'ever. So that's b'meitari. Afta, I didn't say what afta is. Afta is the fruit of I forgot what the name of the tree. It's the fruit. I think the article says what it's called. It's the fruit gallstone, gall something. Yeah. Okay. Gallish. Yeah. Okay, so it's a grayish color, kosher. If you remember, we learned that they used to rub the entire face of the get before they wrote it with this gray offset, so that if you try to erase, it would erase that coating as well, and we would know that someone tampered with the get. It was a way to make things tamper-proof. Okay, but here we're talking about using it for ink. Tani Rab Chia, Kasu be'ever. Aver is if someone soaked lead in water and he created an ink like that. B'shocher, some type of black, pchamin, Rashi says, like coals, that you get all things that you soaked in water and you made ink out of it. Ubeshicher, which Rashi tells us is the same thing we discussed earlier, that shoe polish of a shoemaker, kosher, it would be kosher. So these are all kosher inks. Itmar. Okay. Itmar. Hamaver deyoy al gabe sikra b'Shabbos. We know on Shabbos there's an iser ksiva. You're not allowed to write two oisius, but there's also an iser to be moichik two oisius if the purpose of the mechika is to write other oisius in their place. So what happens if someone had red ink written two letters and you cover them over with black ink on Shabbos? Hamaver diyoy al gabe sikra b'Shabbos. Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish Amri Tarvayu, both Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish agree, chayiv shtayim. You're chayiv for two deraises. Achas mishum kaisei. One because you're writing two oisius with black ink. V'yachas mishum moichek. You're also muchiv to moichek because when you're covering over the red ink with the black ink, you're being moichek it in order to cover it with black ink. So that's considered mechika as well. Rashi says, if you rub out two oisius in order, he's covering them over. You're right, even though he's not technically scraping it off, but like no, he's writing over. The letter was written fully in red, and now he rolled it over in black. Correct. Well, he's going from red to black. That's right. But this is going to be considered a dual iser, so he has two chayuv. Okay. What about diyoy al gabe diyoy? What if it was already black ink and he wrote black ink on top of it, or sikra red ink al gabe sikra? Potter, then he's potter because writing on already an existing writing is not the malacha of kaisev, and therefore he'll be potter. But it seems like we consider black a better writing than red. That's what it seems. It's interesting. We all know that black. You were an accountant, right? So black ink is for sure better than red ink. So everybody wants to cover over their red ink with black ink, but nobody wants to cover over their black ink with red ink. So covering your red ink with black ink, that's misaking. But covering your black ink with red ink, that's makalkel. Okay. What about sikra gabadiyoi? That's the question. Sikra gabadiyoi red on top of black. Amri lo chayiv, amri lo potter. That's a machlokes if that's chayiv or potter, if sikra is considered an operator or not. Amri lo chayiv. One shita holds it's chayiv because moichiku. Technically, he's being moichik the black. Amri lo potter because makalkalu. He's covering over a superior ink with an inferior ink. Boy minei Rish Lakish mir Rabbi Yochanan. Edim she'ein yoidin lich lachtain. What if Edim cannot sign their names? Ma'u sheyichdavu lahem b'sikra. Would you be able to get someone who knows how to sign to write the oisius of the name of these Edim in red, and then v'yichdamu ksavelyon? Would they be able to? I'm sorry, v'yichdamu period, and then the Edim will be able to cover it over, so they basically have a form to go over, so they'll know what to do. Do we say ksav elyon ksav or ein ksav? The black that they're writing on top of the red, is that considered a ksav or is not considered a ksav? Omer lei ein ksav. It's not considered a ksav, and therefore, since the black is not considered a ksav on the red, it wouldn't be a good chesiba. So the get wouldn't be a good get. Omer lei, so he told him, how could you say that? We just learned that ksav elyon is a ksav in Shabbos. Right? We just learned that if there was red ink on Shabbos and you then wrote over the red ink with black ink, that's considered writing. So if it's considered a ksiva l'inyan melecha Shabbos, why isn't it considered a ksiva l'gabe the chesim of an egg? Omer lei, so he answered, Rabbi Yochanan answered, v'chi mipnei she'anu medamin nasa ma'isa. When I said that it's chayiv on Shabbos if you cover over two letters that are written in red ink with black ink, when I said you're chayiv, I didn't mean you're chayiv that you would bring a carbon. I mean you're not allowed to do it because l'chumra, maybe the black ink on the red ink is considered a ksav, but I'm not sure. So I'm not going to do nasa ma'isa. I'm not going to validate a get and be mater anisha l'shuk with such a ksiva. Even though he said chayiv, chayiv would seem to indicate that he knows for sure it's a ksiva, but he didn't mean it. Rashi says, and Rashi says, we're assessing, we're svurim, and we think, we're just because of our own heart, we're leaning to be machmer. That means we're so sure that the black sav on the red sav is considered a sav that will be make based on that. Afil in Shabbos in B'maisil Yadein B'zman Beis Hamikdash lo Yosy Simon al Devorah lahavikun lazar. I would never have let them bring a carbon because of that. So therefore, I'm surely not going to be mater a lady l'shuk with such a chasida. Itmar we had a machlokes. Eidim she'ein yoidim lachtain. What if Eidim don't know how to sign? We actually had this exact brisa before. So we need to help them sign their name. Rav Omar Mekarin Lahem Niyar Chalak. Rashi learned this means is with sirtut. You scrape out the form of a letter, and then you memalnes a karoyim dayoy. And then the Eidim just fill out in with ink. We had earlier, I think in Saita we had that Toys was learned, they actually made a stencil. And they filled in the stencil. So that's the shaila what this means. Ushmul Amar be'aver. What they did is they put aver on it. Okay? How could they have made the form of the letter with aver? That would be a problem. So that's a proper writing. So if you made the outline for these Eidim who didn't know to sign with aver, it's already signed. Their signing on top of it wouldn't be valid. When do we say that if they signed with aver, that's only if it's watered aver, but if it's real lead, that would not be considered signing. So right off the bat, you're going to ask me if watered down aver is a good ink. How could you say that lead itself is not a good ink? But let's look at Rashi. That's not a ksav. But the Mayid Avra, Mayim Sheshorba Meshchitas Aver is. So Reb Moshe actually talks about this. So let me explain. Reb Moshe explains that if it's watery, it will actually absorb into the klap itself, and it will remain permanent. But if it's just lead, it remains on the surface, and it's very easy for it to wipe off. So the ink that's a good ink is ink of lead that's soaked in water, because that will be absorbed into the paper.
The outline,
they make the outline with the lead, which is not a good ksav, and then you can write over it, I think.
and when they make attempts to why it works,
I'm sorry?
and they make attempts to why it works, they always stuff like the dotted line, when you want to keep it good.
Why is what worse?
Why is this? Why is the normal like doing? Why is that not good?
It is good. What do you mean? You fill it with the oil.
Why is Shmuel Eichel from putting lead around and make a
So that doesn't work with a stencil. That's a different item.
why? Why is it better? Both are not right.
I don't know. He likes it. Maybe it's easier. Right? It's easier than the cut a stencil. You wonder why Shmuel didn't go with that item. You're going to soon see Rabbi Vo has a different item. Rabbi Vo Omar b'mei milin. You know what you should use? You should use mei milin. Rashi says that's a mayim sheshar ben apatzim shchukim. It's water that you soaked in it. This gallstone, which we talked about earlier. So once again, we're going to have that same problem. So to Gemara loy kasha. Had the office, had the loy office. Why? She'ein me'mil nagabe me'mil. Look, Rashi. Had the office haklafim ubadim ba'afatim. If the cloth was already smeared with this graying substance, then roishmin alein esaedim b'me'milin. Then you could make the lines with me'milin. You know why? They'll have a ksav. The me'milin, which is afza, which is the same thing from the golf plant. If you make a little letter about that on top of the already grayed out letter, on top of the whole grayed surface, that's not really a good ksav. It's like using a black pencil on a black piece of paper. You could barely see it. It's not considered a good ksav, but it's enough that the edim can trace over it with a different coloring. And the Mishnah that says you can use this me'milin as the ink is only on a piece of paper that didn't have a coating on it. So therefore, that would be a proper writing. Okay, gewaltig. With a picture, I don't recall that. Although the Rambam's signature was a picture of a boat. But whatever it is, it's speaking about somebody who couldn't do a chasima. So he probably couldn't do that either. He probably didn't know how to write. He probably didn't know how to make a picture of a boat either. He probably didn't know what to do. You know the story with the fellow who couldn't write. You know the story. There was once a shamus in the Besmedrish, and he was a Yid who came over after the war, and he was a shamus. He cleaned and he prepared the Besmedrish. He did his good job, but he didn't speak English. He was a European. You know that story, Eddie. That's right. Yeah, that's correct. So you know what happened to him. That's right. That's right. Okay, so to Gemara. I have a great aunt.
Do we get to hear the joke in internet?
Was a multi-millionaire. She was an immensely wealthy woman. She was not able to sign her name. Rapapa Amar Beroik. In English now. Yeah. Beroik, you use saliva. So what would you do? They would use saliva to make the outline of the letters for these agents. There was a Yid by the name of Papa, and he was an oxen dealer. So they told her Papa Bara to use Roik. The Hanamila be Gittin. Roik will work for Gittin. Aval b'shtaris loy. By shtaris, that you need Adam that know how to sign. By Gittin, we're trying to make it easier for the get to be valid. So we'll do this assistance. If you don't have Adam that can sign it, we'll help them sign. We'll let them use aids. But for a regular star, it's got to be by the book. Aval b'shtaris loy. How do we know that? There was once a Rav who allowed Adam who didn't know how to sign using these aids by a regular star. Then Nagde Rav Kahana, and Rav Kahana gave him Malchus because he did the wrong thing. So it's clear that this whole way to help Adam sign with a stencil or with putting an impression for them to copy over, that only works for Gittin because there's a special kula to help a woman go free, but not for regular stars. I'm sorry? I guess whoever allowed that to happen. I'm sorry? Yeah. So whoever let that happen. Tanya Kabasei de Rav. We have a raya to Rav that holds that for a get, you could use this aid and make the stencil for them. It says in the Bryce as follows: Edim she'en yoidin lachtain. If Edim don't know how to sign, mikarin leniyar chalak umemalin zakroim deyoy. Exactly as we do. Amar Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, b'medvar mamur, and when is this allowed? Only begiti noshim. Aval b'shechrei avodim v'shar kol hashtaros. Im yoidim likrois, if they know how to read, which is something that we haven't discussed up until now, v'lachtain, and they can sign choisvin. Im lav ein choisvin. So it seems from here, well, first let's get clarity on what the Bryce is saying. Kriya mandachar shemei. Why is Reb Shimon ben Gamliel introducing a new thing of that they could read? That's not what the Tanakama was talking about. Zok Gemara, in fact, the Tanakama was talking about that as well. If Edim cannot read, so how could they sign on a get if they don't even know what they're reading? The Allah is Kayin Lifneim. You will read it for them. They could sign based on them hearing what you read the get as saying. And if they cannot sign, then you make this stencil for them. And on that, Rabbi Shimon argued on both points. Only by Gittin Noshim would we read for them, and would we allow them to sign with an aid. Which seems like Rav Kahana was working with Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, because by a regular star he gave somebody malchus for not doing it properly, allowing Adam to use an aid. So Amar Belazar, my time at Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Why, according to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, is get different? If he holds this is not a good chasima, so why is he allowing it by get? We want women to be able to get gittin. And imagine this is all they have, and the husband's going away. They need to make sure that this woman will be able to go free. Amar Rabba Paskin halacha Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. What does Rab Shimon ben Gamliel say? So the Pashtus is, he says that for a get, you could read it for them if they can't read. You could make them a stencil if they can't write, but not for other stories. For Rav Gamda, B'Shmei de Rava Amar, Rav Gamda, in the name of Rava, said, Ein halacha. The halacha is not like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. So the halacha is not like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. Who is the halacha like? The Ela command Rabbanan. So you're saying we possibly like the Rabbanan that every type of star you can also read it for them, A, and B, you can make a stencil for them. But that's not true. How could Rav Gamda have said that? The Avad Uvda B'Shar stories, the Nagdi Rav Kahana. So how could Rav Gamda possibly like the Rabbanan against Rav Kahana? And for the Gemara, Tirgama Akriya, where did Rav Gamda paskin like the Rabbanon? Not Lagabe making a stencil. Because Lagabe making a stencil, Rav Kahana said they're not allowed to use by other stories. But he paskin like the Rabbanon Lagabe Kriya. Rav Kahana never had a situation where they read the star to the Adam who didn't understand what they were reading. He was only talking about, he only gave some malchus for giving them a stencil to sign. But of course, Rav Kahana would agree, maybe, that if they couldn't read it, you could read it for them. And that's where Rav Gamda was passing like Rabbanan, only legabe the fact that if the Adam can't read it, you read it for them. But Avada, legabe the fact that you're not allowed to use a stencil for the Adam, of course, even Rav Gamda agrees to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Beautiful. So halacha l'maisa is you're not, for other stories, if they don't understand it, you could read it to them as long as they're able to sign their name. I hear. We have to look up the halacha to see. But at least Rav Gamda is not a steer to Rav Kahana. Yeah. Rabbi Yehuda mitzdayer. It was very hard for him to read. It's not talking about Kriya. Nagdi Rav Kahana is speaking about Nagdi Rav Kahana. Tigama Rav Gamda a Kriya. If you look at Rashi on the second line, Rashi Tigama Ladar Rav Gamda a Kriya. So we look at Rashi. Shem Yoidim Lachtaim. If they know how to sign, Abba B'Shem Yoidim Likrois. Only their chopper dummy. The Kar Kamaya Acharini Karabanan. And you could read it in front of them, and somebody else could read it in front of the Adam like Rabbanan. But with Rav Kahana's B'Shem Yoidim Lachtaim, there, B'Gav Chasima, Amram with Rav Kahana La'il, where Rav Kahana gave pets for somebody who allowed the Chasima. Rabbi Yehuda Mitzvah Bakari, it was very hard for him to read. He had to strain himself terribly to be able to read, but he insisted on it. Rashi Zokin Haya, who was older, but he couldn't see well. If you ever had to sign as an aid or as a dain, mitzdayer b'kriyas ashtar. It was hard for him to strain himself to read it, but nevertheless, v'karireyu, he would read it, v'chaysim, and he would sign. Amalei Ula, Rebbe, why are you working so hard? Loy tzrichas, you don't have to strain yourself to read it. The Rebbe Lazar Morad Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Lazar, who was the king of Eretz Yisrael, he was the biggest posek. Everybody accepted his Piskei Halacha. Karu Kamei v'chasim. He allowed someone to read it for him, and then he signed. Meaning, you don't have to be mitzvah yourself. Let someone read it for you. So this seems to indicate that we paskin like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, even like a reading, right? But I'm sorry, we paskin like the Rabbanon. This is much like Rav Gamda, that we paskin like Rabbanon, that you could have someone read it for you. Rab Nachman Karu Kamei Sifri de Yoni v'chasim. Rab Nachman, he was a very chashav adai. People were afraid of him. The Sifri de Daini were afraid of him. They worked for him. They were in the court. They were in awe of him. So he trusted them to read it for him. However, with Dafka Rab Nachman, this is Dafka Rab Nachman because anybody who's reading it for Rab Nachman would be afraid to read it wrong because it's the great Rab Nachman. But the Safri de Daini, Dafka Safri de Daini, who have a special fear of Rab Nachman. So unless there are these two components, only Rab Nachman could rely on it, and only Safri de Daini, the Istalei Masa. So in fact, here it's paskening like what Chaim said earlier. It's paskening avada that you cannot have anybody read it for you. The only exception that we made was if it was Rab Nachman and it was a Safri Daini, then you could have somebody else read it for you. Otherwise, if you're not able to read it yourself, you're not allowed to sign a shtar. That's right. You always have to read the fine print before you sign in it. Before you sign. And before you click I accept, you have to read the 4,000 pages of the terms and conditions. Whenever you click on the website, I figured, do you always read all the fine print and you click I agree on the government website to get like 4,000 pages of nonsense? Rav Papa, but the Gemara says here you can't trust anybody. You got to read it yourself. Rav Papa, he have a osla kamei shtar parsa the avid bar koi shal nochem. We had this case when a shtar would be presented to him that was made in a goyish court. Makri lahu, he couldn't read it because Rav Papa didn't read Persian. So what he would do is he would take two trustworthy Persians, and he would have each one, independent of the other, read get them and translate it for him. Read the shtar. Makri lishnei nochem zeh shaloi b'fnei zeh b'mesiach levitumai, and then he would compare, and if both renditions of the shtar corresponded with each other, so then he trusted that it was a good shtar. And he even used the shtar to be goyve from the chosim mishabodim. Rashi asked, when we learned this Gemara a couple of blot ago, it said there he could only be goyve from the chosim b'nei chayrin because they're not kosher edim. So Rashi explains the answer here. If you look at Rashi mishabdi, that's benasa beheaded the less lekala. That if it's not made in an official bezin, but if it's made in an official bezin, a goyish bezin, there would be a koil even if it's completely a secular shtar signed by secular agents. Amar Bashi, Amar li Rav Huna bar Noson, Hachi Amar Amemar. This is what a Meimer said. High shtar parsa. If you have a Persian shtar, the Chasimi Alais had Yisrael, that you have Yidin that signed it, Magvinin Bey Mishabdi, that you would be able to collect from the Chosim Mishubadim. Correct the Gemara, we had this exact Gemara before. V'lo yadi lemikri. How could it be a kosher shtar if Yidin sign a shtar that's written in Persian? They have no idea what they're signing. Talking about b'diadi. No, we're talking about the Jews that signed New Persian. They understood what the shtar said. Correct the Gemara, but if it's a Persian shtar, you have to have that layer of charcoal, the gray layer on it, so that if there's any changes made, we would be able to tell that it was tampered with. Persian stars don't have that security feature. So it had it. This Persian star was made differently. Chaim was talking about reading all the fine print. In the stars, there had to be a summary of what the whole star said right at the last line. And a Persian star normally does not have that either. It has that too. Correct Gemara, if it has all the features of a regular Jewish star and it's signed by Jewish Edim, well, my Kamash Malon. So what is the whole Chiddush of Rav Huna bar Noson in the name of a Meimar? What's the whole Chiddush that the star is good? It's a regular Jewish star. The Gemara Kamash Malon, the Chol Lashon Kosher. The Chiddush is that it doesn't have to be written in Lashon Kodesh. The shtar could even be written in any other language, such as Persian. Then we learn, get shekasvoi ivris. What if the get was written in Lashon Kodesh? The Edav Yavanis, but the Edim are Greek. Or Yavanis, Vedav ivris. Or if it's the opposite, kosher, it would be kosher. So why do I need a meimar? Yeah, that's right. But he didn't sign. So Frank Gemara, why do I need a meimar to tell me Ashtar could be b'chaloshain? We have a Mefurish Brisa that says Ashtar could be b'chaloshain. Yavanis. I would have thought that Dafka Gerisha, once again, we know we always try to be Machshir Gittin because we don't want women to be trapped as a gunai. Maybe by story mominus, you wouldn't be allowed to write it in a different language. That you can. Amar Shmuel, what happens if nothing law niyarchala? You gave her a paper which only seemed to be blank. The Amar law, and you told her Areza Gitech, and you told her this is your get. Migureshes, she is Migureshes. Why? Chayshinon Shema b'ben Milan Kosvoi. We're choshed that maybe it was written with May Milan right, becomes invisible right away. Rashes b'Mei Milan Kosvu v'Nivlu, and they got absorbed into the paper and they're no longer visible. It is good. Tosfos explains that if it was blank when you gave it to her, that wouldn't be a good get. We're choshed that it was visible when you gave it to her, and now later on it's not visible anymore. But at the time when you gave it to her, it has to be visible. That's one Svar Tosfos says. The other Svar Tosfos says is maybe it's still visible, but you have to look at it more closely. Meisei Freik the Gemara. If you're telling me a star that's invisible, a get that's invisible, is a good get, then why did the Brisa that we're about to quote not share that great chiddush? Rather, it only shared a smaller chiddush. What if someone gives a paper to a woman and says, "I raise a giteich," and you know what she did? She took it. She took it. V'zarkasa liyam. She threw it into the yam. Or she threw it into the fire. Or she destroyed it. So he gave her a get, and then she destroyed it. So she has no way to prove that she got a get other than the fact that when her husband gave it to her, he said, "This is a get." And then the husband said, "The chazav omer shtar pasamu." He said, "This is a shtar pasam." A shtar pasam is, what if I want to look rich? I want to look rich for some reason. I'm applying for credit. I want to look like I'm rich. So I'll ask my friends who trust me to write me out shtaris that they owe me millions of dollars. So I could show all this money. I could get a loan based on my receivables with phony receivables. That's what a shtar pasam is. Or shtar amana is, if I'm looking to borrow money from somebody, I'll write him a shtar already that I owe him, so it'll be easy for him to just give me the money. So here, he gave a get, but we could never verify the get because she destroyed it as soon as she got it. And as soon as she destroyed it, he said, "No, it wasn't a get." But the Allah is Mugareshes. She is Mugareshes. But loy kol heimenu loisra. Once he said, "This is your get," we look at her right away that she's no longer an Eshes Ish, and therefore we don't believe him to ask her to make her back into an Eshes Ish. The only time that we're mad at such a thing is if when he gave her the original get, there was writing on it. Now the question is he denying that it was a get? But there's surely writing on it. But if there isn't even writing on it, like the case that we discussed earlier from Shmuel, loy. So it's shver on Shmuel. Because if in fact, even if there's no writing on the get, even if you have the get and there's no writing on it, it's still a good get, the Brisa should have said that case, which is a bigger thing. Dr. Gemara, Kikam or Shmuel, what Shmuel meant is not that if it's completely blank. It's the Batkinan lay b'maya denara. Maya denara is the olden day version of ultraviolet light. You can see if there's something written with invisible ink if you shine ultraviolet light on it. Rashi says what this ultraviolet light is, b'maya denara tseva shakarin twali. It's a bluish color. Umarvirin me'at tseva olav, and you pour this ink on this colored water. Upilate aisyosh shabala b'niras. Any letters that were absorbed into the paper that are no longer visible, it'll make them come back up. So Shmuel said that if it's blank in a chanami, you wouldn't be able to be mater the woman. It's only if you could use chemicals to restore it. Pull it. If the letters come back up, yes, then we'll say it was again. Pull it lav klubhu. Even if it now brings out those letters, hashdu the polit. At the time where he gave it to her, there were no letters there. There were no letters there. Now it came out. Doesn't make it if it came out now. It has to. Those letters have to be there when he hands it to her. Shmuel didn't really mean to say that she goes free. She doesn't go free. But we're choshed that she's mugareshes. And therefore, even if her husband were to die, she would not be able to marry a kohen. Because l'chumra, we're worried that she might be mugareshes because maybe the get was valid when he handed it to her. But avadi, she's not mutalashim. Amar Avino, Amar Li Ameimer, Hachi Amar Mereimer Mishmei Ravdimi. This is what Mereimer said in the name of Ravdimi. Hani betrei the Yav Gita Kamayu. If there's two Adam that are asked to sign a get, Sharichi Lemikarya, they have to read it. Meisvei Hareza Gita Vinat Lasi because Kol Yamil or Lechol Dover Abed Lechol Amar Shtar Pasamu Shtar Amanu Hu Mugareshes. Veloy Kalamen Al Oisra. Break the Gemara. The Amar Sharichi Lemikarya. If the Adam had to read it, and I'm sorry, not the Eid Chasima, the Eid Mesira. If you're watching handing over of a get, you need to read what this fellow is handing over. So the kasha is, we had a brisa that says that if she destroys it as soon as she gets it, he's not named to ask her. Why don't you just ask the Edom? They read it. Ask him. Ask the Edom what it said. If it was a get or if it was a star passam. Zok to Gemara, Iyam Trichel Makaya, Labasa de Karyuya. Me matzi amar lahachi. After they read it, before he gave it to her, how could they say it was a shtar basim? They read it, they saw it was a get. Dr. Malay Tricha. Because what happened was the buzzer de Karyua, after they read the get, he didn't hand it to her directly, he put it back into his pocket. And then after he took it back out again. But how do we know he took out the same document that he put into his pocket? Maybe he swapped it out and he gave him a different one, Kamash Malon, that we assume that he gave her the same paper that they inspected. Who got there was a man. He threw a get to his wife and it fell in between a whole bunch of barrels. So now they wanted to find it because no one ever read that paper. When they looked in between the barrels, they found the mezuzah there. So we have to assume that he never gave her a get. He gave her a mezuzah. Amar Nachman, mezuzah benidani lo shkifa. It's not common to find a mezuzah between the barrels, which means we're going to assume that he threw a mezuzah there. And there wasn't just some other random mezuzah lying around, because mezuzahs are normally not found in between barrels. That's only if you found one mezuzah lying around in between the barrels. Gimel, but if you found multiple mezuzahs lying around there, then we know for sure one of them was for sure lying around. It didn't come from him because he only threw one. So therefore, you'll say, since there's at least one mezuzah there that he didn't throw there, so once there's stuff in these barrels that don't belong there, maybe all the mezuzahs that you find didn't belong there, and maybe what he threw is a get. So how come we don't find the get? Maybe there are mice there, and the mice ate it up, and therefore, we will say that it's a good get. Okay, we'll stop here, and B'ez Hashem, we will be mamshech tomorrow. Shkoyach, everybody, have a wonderful, wonderful day.